for an update on the agreement for a public service contract for adult education tutors. In particular, Minister, I'm asking for as much information as possible as to the terms and conditions that will be in that contract and whether finally the adult education tutors will be recognised and given fair terms and conditions for the work they do.
Thanks, Gaelic. Thanks very much to Deputy Harkin. And at the outset, I want to acknowledge this is an issue you have championed and highlighted in this House for a long period of time. You've raised it on a number of occasions, including leaders' questions. I acknowledge that. And it's also an issue that I want to say is dragging on too long. And I know that that's very, very much the conviction of the adult education tutors and those who represent them. They play a central role in meeting learners' needs, and the regularisation of their terms and conditions of tutors is a priority for me and my department. Steps taken to achieve this do include the provision in 2019 of access to leave schemes, paid leave, and the appropriate public sector pension scheme. The majority of tutors are paid on the teacher unqualified rate and have received building momentum pay increases, but there are a smaller group of tutors paid on the self-financing rate, which was originally only intended to be used for self-financing and not exchequer-funded courses. As such, this rate has not been increased under national pay agreements. Work is underway to retrospectively award building momentum increases to this group this year. In terms of the final elements of the overall process, following very extensive engagement by my own department together with the Department of Education, which currently retains legal responsibility for the terms and conditions of all employees in the ETB sector, working with officials in the Department of Public Expenditure, a proposal did issue from my department to staff representatives last year to establish a new grade, a grade of adult educator, with a standardised pay scale aligned with the Youth Reach resource person scale. This was, at the time, seen, I think, as a welcome breakthrough. The proposal provides for a consistent approach across ETBs into the future. Each of the over 2,800 tutors employed across the ETBs will have the option to avail of the proposal and assimilate onto the proposed new adult educator pay scale or remain on their existing arrangements. But the implementation of the proposal then has been subject of further negotiations with staff representatives, and if I can be blunt, the sticking point and a legitimate issue was around arrangements for incremental progression. That was the outstanding issue. The unions and the ETB management have drafted a paper on the implementation process for the proposal, and I'm pleased to say this has now been agreed in principle between the parties. I'm also pleased to tell the Deputy that both departments met with ETBI this week on Tuesday, I believe, to discuss the paper, and arising from these discussions, the proposal has now been finalised between the ETBI and unions. I want to thank people for working on that. We intend to submit the final proposal to the Department of Public Expenditure Reform today, and I hope that we can bring this matter to a swift conclusion.
Thank you, Minister. And you talked about a new adult educator pay scale. And from speaking to adult education tutors, they don't want teacher contracts, or they don't want contracts aligned to the terms and conditions of resource workers. They want to be recognised for the work they do. It's not better or worse. It's different, and it's reasonable that any contract would reflect that difference and indeed the actual work that they do. I mean, they do the same work as further education and training and post-primary level 5 colleagues. They want to be paid for their holidays properly, Minister. That's only reasonable. And I know that they are looking for clarification as to what's in the contract, because I've been told that there's, as far as they are concerned, there's a lot of ambiguity about this, and I'm asking for clarification, and I know you have provided some already. And finally, Minister, as you recognised, some ETBs have not honoured the Building Momentum public pay agreement for adult tutors. They say they're waiting for a circular from the department. Such a thing doesn't exist. I'm asking, can you help sort this out?
And thank you to both deputies for raising this important issue. So my understanding is this: that very good progress was made in terms of agreeing that grade, and it's not. And if I suggested it was, I apologise. It's not for suggesting that the work that an adult education tutor does is similar to another job, but it is aligning the terms and conditions with other people working in the further education training sector, which I think is appropriate. It's getting them into a regularised space, a proper contract with the normal things that people would expect to be in any contract. The sticking point was around the proposal in relation to an increment. The proposal was for an increment to be awarded following completion of 1,000 1,043 contact hours rather than on the completion of 52 weeks worked. And the unions contended that Section 9 of the Protection of Employees Part-Time Work Act 2001 requires that part-time and full-time adult educators receive increments after the same period of employment, regardless of the number of hours worked during that period of employment. I sought legal advice in relation to this, and on foot of that, we have worked very closely with ETBI and with the representative bodies of the adult education tutors, and as a result, an updated proposal is now issuing to the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform on the basis of that increment being awarded on the completion of 52 weeks. So that's currently where we are literally right now. It follows on from a meeting where there was an agreement in principle between the TUI, SIPTU and the ETB sector on the implementation process on the 12th of January, following a meeting with my department between the ETB sector and the unions on the 16th of January. I think that was Tuesday. We'll now submit the proposal to DEPR, and following that we'll be straight back to the unions. I want to see this issue resolved. I know they know the adult education tutors really want to see it resolved. A huge amount of work has been done in good faith by everyone. There was a couple of sticking points around implementation. The building momentum piece around the increases due to those tutors on Solus funded programmes and paid on self-financing rates will also be addressed as part of this process.
Minister, but just again to clarify, to gain one increment on the pay scale, do they have to work the full academic year in terms of hours? Because in other parts of the public sector, one calendar year is 1 point on the pay scale, and it's pro rata, Minister, so there's no advantage or disadvantage here. I think it's just being reasonable and fair. So if you could just clarify that for me. I wasn't quite sure what you said. Also, Minister, and I know you mentioned pensions earlier, but they are asking that all hours worked be pensionable. And again, I think that's a reasonable ask. And finally, Minister, in the last few seconds that I have, can I just recognise the very important work of the late Lorcan McNamee in making the case for adult tutors for so many years. Lorcan died just before Christmas, but I want to recognise his very valuable contribution in supporting adult tutors for very many years.
Well, thanks, Deputy Harkin. Of course, I join with you in sending my condolences to the family of Lorcan McNamee and understanding from your contribution the important contribution he made in relation to adult education tutors, and may he rest in peace. The proposal was for an increment to be awarded following the completion of 1,043 contact hours rather than on the completion of the 52 weeks worked. And as I said, the unions contended that under Section 9, I'm just saying this for clarity for the record of the House, under Section 9 of the Protection of Employees Part-Time Work Act 2001, that this requires that whether you were part-time or full-time, you'd receive increments after the same period of employment, regardless of the number of hours worked during that period of employment. The unions also saw confirmation that Circular Letter 6527, which I think is called the Protection of Employees Fixed Term Work Act 2003, implementation of agreement in respect of tutors employed by education and training boards, will continue to apply to their members, including those who choose to assimilate and those who do not choose to assimilate. Legal advice was sought and was received from the Office of the Attorney General in relation to these matters, and in light of this advice I'm now seeking approval for the award of an incremental credit to be based on the completion of the 52 weeks of work rather than the hours. The associated cost of all tutors receiving the annual increment is therefore being forwarded to DEPR for their consideration, and I wouldn't expect that a significant amount would arise for this until approximately 2026. I'll come back to you directly on the pension issue as well, but that sounds logical from your contribution.